Hey, welcome to our channel. Make sure to subscribe and turn on the bell so you never miss our latest content.
For 14 years, I believed I understood love, every unguarded smile, every sigh in the dark, every silence that carried more weight than words. Those years taught me the rhythm of another soul, the way her laughter softened when it was real, the way her eyes betrayed a truth she wouldn't speak. I built my world around those small certainties, convinced that love, once forged, could never break. But love is a trickster. 14 years can weave two lives into a seamless pattern. Yet all it takes is one moment, one unexpected conversation for the threads to loosen. I didn't see it coming, not then. Looking back now, I realized the unraveling had already begun, quiet, invisible, long before that night when everything finally broke. Our life, Danielle's and mine, was that chord. To anyone looking in from the outside, it was a masterpiece of stability. I was Mark, the nursing technician. My days belonged to beeping machines, sterile corridors, and the fragile intimacy of caring for people at their most vulnerable. In that routine, I found a certain peace, order in the chaos, purpose in being the calm hand in a storm. My life was measured in 12-hour shifts, and the steady rhythm of a beating heart. Eleanor was the storm itself, a beautiful, brilliant tempest of energy and ambition. She worked in communications, a world of sharp suits, clever words, and high-stakes pitches that I found both fascinating and intimidating. She could walk into a room and command it without raising her voice, her smile, a strategic tool that was as disarming as it was dazzling. I was immensely proud of her. She was the star, and I was the steadfast astronomer, content to chart her brilliant trajectory across the sky. With our two kids, Noah and Sophie, we weren't just a family. We were a solar system, held together by a gravitational pull I believed to be absolute. But gravity can weaken over distance. And in the 6 months leading up to the rupture, I had begun to feel a subtle, creeping distance, a coolness in the space between us. It wasn't one big thing, it was 1,000 tiny, almost imperceptible shifts. It was the way her phone became a permanent extension of her hand, its screen glowing in the dark long after I had turned off my bedside lamp. It was the conversations that started to feel like interviews, with her giving polite, distracted answers while her mind was clearly still at the office. "How was your day?" I'd ask, rubbing her shoulders as she stood over the stove. "Fine," she'd reply, the word a placeholder. "Julian's really pushing the team for the new Glimmer account. It's intense." Julian Vance, the executive director. The name had become a recurring character in our evening summaries. "Julian thinks this. Julian wants that. Julian praised my presentation today." At first, I felt a vicarious pride. My wife, the rising star, recognized by the man at the top. I pictured him as some older, mentor-like figure. I never imagined him as a threat. The foundation of our 14 years was too solid, too deep. A person doesn't worry about termites when their house is made of granite. One Tuesday, about a month before the party, I came home early to surprise her and the kids with pizza. I found her in the living room, not working, but just staring out the window at the rain, a half-empty glass of wine on the table beside her. There was a look on her face I'd never seen before, a profound, aching emptiness. "Lena?" I said softly. She jumped, startled, the mask of the competent executive instantly snapping back into place. "Liam, you're home early. Everything okay?" I asked, gesturing to the window. "You looked a million miles away." She forced a laugh, a brittle sound. "Just tired. Long day. Pizza sounds amazing. You're a lifesaver." She changed the subject, but the image of her face in that unguarded moment stayed with me. It was the first time I consciously registered that the cracks in our foundation might be more than superficial. I told myself it was stress. I told myself to be a better husband, to be more supportive, so I doubled down. I took on more of the household duties, handled the kids' morning chaos, so she could have an extra 30 minutes of peace, and listened attentively to her stories about office politics. Even when the names and projects blurred together, I was trying to patch the cracks from my side, not realizing the pressure causing them was coming from within her. The night of her company party was the epicenter. I was supposed to go with her, to be the proud husband on her arm as she celebrated the new $1 million contract her team had secured. But the hospital had other plans. A brutal multi-car pileup on the interstate turned the ER into a controlled war zone. My supervisor called, his voice tense. "I need you, Liam. It's all hands on deck." I called Eleanor from a supply closet, the only quiet place I could find. "I'm so sorry, honey. I can't get out of it." "Oh." The disappointment in her voice was a palpable thing. "Maybe I shouldn't go, then." "No, you have to go," I insisted, feeling a pang of guilt. "You and your team earned this. Go, have a glass of champagne for me. Dazzle them." I pictured her in the elegant black dress she'd bought for the occasion, the one that highlighted the graceful curve of her neck. "Just don't stay out too late." "I won't," she promised. "I'll just make an appearance." My shift was a grueling 12-hour ordeal. I dealt with shattered bones, frantic relatives, and the stark, humbling line between life and death. In that chaotic environment, our domestic life felt like a safe, distant harbor. I thought of Eleanor, imagined her laughing with her colleagues, and felt a sense of peace. She deserved this night. She deserved to shine. When I finally dragged myself home, the first pale hints of dawn were streaking the sky. The house was still and silent. I checked on the kids, their small chests rising and falling in the peaceful rhythm of sleep. In our bedroom, Eleanor was curled on her side, her back to me. The black dress was draped over the armchair. Her heels lay on the floor where she'd kicked them off. Everything looked normal. I showered away the sterile scent of the hospital, slipped into bed, and pressed a soft kiss to her shoulder. She made a small sound and shifted, but didn't wake. I fell into an exhausted sleep, convinced I was lying next to the same woman I had married 14 years ago. The change in the days that followed was no longer subtle. It was a palpable, suffocating silence. She moved through our home like a phantom, her body present but her spirit gone. She'd flinch if I touched her waist as I passed her in the kitchen. Her eyes, which I used to be able to read like a book, were now shuttered, guarded. Mealtimes were excruciating. She'd push food around her plate, offering monosyllabic answers to my questions while giving the kids a brittle, overly bright smile. One evening, our daughter Sophie, who misses nothing, asked, "Mommy, why are you sad?" Eleanor's fork clattered onto her plate. She pasted on that same strained smile. "I'm not sad, sweetie. Just very, very tired from work." She looked at me then, a desperate, pleading look, as if begging me to believe the lie. And I did, or I tried to, because the alternative was too terrifying to contemplate. My mind, trained in diagnostics, began to run through possibilities. Was she sick? Was she hiding a health scare? Was she being pushed out at work? Was she depressed? I tiptoed around her, treating her like a fragile patient, desperately trying to diagnose an illness without knowing any of the symptoms. The idea of infidelity never once entered the differential. Betrayal wasn't a symptom. It was a foreign disease, one I believed our marriage was immune to. The diagnosis, when it finally came, was delivered in a small, generic coffee shop with cheerful music playing in the background. The phone call that summoned me there was abrupt, her voice a thin, tight wire of panic. "Liam, I need to talk to you. It's serious." The word serious is a code red in a medical family. I raced from the hospital, my heart pounding a frantic tattoo against my ribs. I pictured a car accident, a grim diagnosis from a doctor, 100 terrible scenarios. None of them came close to the reality. She was sitting in a corner booth, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her, her hands clutching a coffee cup for warmth. The story came out in a torrent, a disjointed, choked confession. She started with the party, with the champagne, with me not being there. She painted a picture of the night, the music, the laughter, the way her boss, Julian, had cornered her, his words like perfectly aimed darts, stroking her ego, highlighting her talent, making her feel seen in a way she claimed she hadn't in years. I listened, my body going rigid. Each detail was a nail being hammered into the coffin of our marriage. The invitation to his newly renovated office. The excuse of a possible promotion. The door closing, muffling the sounds of the party. The way he was suddenly too close. The kiss happened quickly, she whispered, her eyes fixed on a crack in the table. I should have pushed him away, Liam. I know I should have. But I just stood there. And then I gave in. I gave in. The phrase detonated in the silence of my mind, leveling everything I thought I knew. 14 years of shared memories, of inside jokes, of weathering illnesses and financial scares and sleepless nights with crying babies, all of it incinerated in an instant. My past became a lie, my present a nightmare, and my future an empty, smoking crater. She didn't stop there. She plunged forward, as if needing to purge the poison. At that moment, her voice broke, a terrible, guttural sob escaping her lips. I wasn't thinking about you, or the kids. I was just there, being desired, and it felt. She couldn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. The pain was a physical thing. It felt like my ribs were cracking, like my lungs couldn't draw air. But the story took an even darker turn. The immediate, crushing regret. The silent, tear-filled ride home. The days of guilt that followed, which I had misinterpreted as stress. And then, the blackmail. My brain, already reeling, struggled to keep up. Julian hadn't just been a predator in the moment. He was a monster in the aftermath. He had secretly filmed them. He had called her to a meeting, laid out printed photos on the table, and told her that their partnership was just beginning. He wasn't trying to hide their mistake. He was trying to perpetuate it, to own her with it. A strange, cold fury began to seep into the cracks of my shattered heart. This man hadn't just slept with my wife. He had tried to colonize her life, and by extension, mine. She told me how his threats had initially paralyzed her, but how his invasive touch, His disgusting smile of ownership had transformed her fear into a white-hot rage. She described, in a voice that was now steady with a grim resolve, how she had recorded his next set of threats, how she had taken the evidence to the company president, how she had walked into a police station and filed a report, handing over the photos, the note, and the audio file that damned him. She had done all the right things, the brave things, after she had done the one, unforgivable, wrong thing. When she finally finished, the cheerful cafe music sounded like a macabre joke. She sat there, weeping, awaiting my verdict. For a long minute, I couldn't speak. I was drowning in a sea of conflicting emotions. Rage at her, hatred for him, a deep, sorrowful pity for the trap she had fallen into, and an overwhelming, soul-crushing grief for the life we had lost. I tried to sort through the wreckage. She had been violated, blackmailed, threatened. She was a victim, but she had also been a willing participant. She had made a choice. The two truths warred in my mind. Then, through the fog of pain, one question emerged, cold and clear. It was the question that would determine everything. I slowly stood up, my legs feeling unsteady. I looked down at her, this stranger who wore my wife's face. If he hadn't blackmailed you, I asked, my voice a hollow echo of itself, would you have told me? Her head snapped up. Her tear-streaked face was a canvas of shock and dawning horror. She understood the weight of the question instantly. She opened her mouth, but no sound emerged. The answer was in her silence. The answer was a definitive, soul-destroying no. She would have carried the secret. She would have let me live the lie. Sleeping next to her every night, ignorant of the chasm that had opened up between us. Her confession wasn't born of remorse for her betrayal of me. It was born of fear of him. That silence was the final, fatal blow. I turned and walked out of the cafe. I didn't run. I didn't shout. My movements felt detached, as if I were watching a movie of someone else's life falling apart. The sound of the door closing behind me was the softest, most violent sound I had ever heard. I don't remember driving home. I remember walking into our house, and feeling like a trespasser. Every photo on the wall was a mockery. A wedding picture of two young, hopeful people who had no idea what was coming. A family portrait on the beach, Noah and Sophie laughing on our shoulders. It was all a lie. A beautifully curated museum of a life that had ceased to exist. When Eleanor finally came home hours later, having arranged for the kids to stay at her mother's, the dam of my numbness broke. How could you? The question exploded out of me, raw and ragged. I was pacing the living room, the space suddenly too small to contain my rage. 14 years. Was any of it real? Or was it all just a performance? Liam, please, she sobbed, shrinking on the couch. Don't you dare cry and play the victim now, I roared, pointing a shaking finger at her. You made a choice. You chose to walk into that room. You chose to lie to me, day after day. That wasn't him. That was you. The anger was a cleansing fire, burning through the shock and pain. Our kids, Eleanor, our children are sleeping in another house tonight because their mother decided that a moment of feeling desired by her boss was more important than their entire world. How could you be so selfish? Each word was meant to wound, and I could see them landing. Her silent tears were her only defense. I felt a savage satisfaction in her pain, and then a wave of disgust at myself for feeling it. I was becoming someone I didn't recognize. That night, I grabbed a pillow and a blanket and went to the guest room. The 10 feet of hallway between our bedroom and that spare room felt like an uncrossable continent. I didn't sleep. I lay in the dark, staring at the unfamiliar shadows on the ceiling, and replayed our entire 14-year history. I scrutinized every memory, searching for clues I had missed, for other lies, other deceptions. Had she ever loved me? Or had I just been the safe, stable foundation upon which she could build her brilliant life? The granite house was full of termites after all, and they had eaten it hollow from the inside out. The next days were a blur of cold, functional interactions. We spoke only of logistics concerning the kids. The house was filled with a silence so heavy it felt like a physical presence. I received a call from a Detective Hayes, who asked me questions in a calm, professional tone that felt utterly surreal. Mr. Sullivan, can you describe your wife's emotional state over the past few weeks? I answered his questions like an automaton, providing a clinical summary of the destruction of my family for a police report. Then came the news that Julian had been arrested, fired, facing criminal charges. There was no victory in it for me. It was just a messy, ugly postscript to a story that had already ended. I spent a few nights in a sterile motel room, needing to breathe air that wasn't saturated with our shared history. I sat on the edge of a lumpy bed, the television murmuring in the background, and I made a decision. I thought about forgiveness. I understood human weakness. My job showed it to me every day. Perhaps I could, eventually, forgive the act of infidelity. But the deception that followed, the fact that the truth only came out under duress, that was a different kind of wound. It wasn't a wound to my pride. It was a wound to the very structure of reality. Trust is the baseline. It's the assumption that the person you love is who they say they are. Once that's gone, what's left? A stranger, a housemate, a co-parent, but not a partner, not a wife. I went home the next day. She was waiting, her face etched with a desperate, fragile hope. I didn't prolong her agony. We sat in the living room, in the same spots we always did, and I delivered the final sentence. I wanted divorce. Her reaction was visceral. A deep, keening wail of despair. She begged, she pleaded, she made promises. Liam, please, don't do this. I made a terrible mistake, the worst mistake of my life. I will spend the rest of my life making it up to you, for us, for our family. Give me a chance to earn back your trust. I looked at her, and for the first time, I felt a profound, aching sadness instead of rage. It's not a lack of forgiveness, Eleanor, I said, my voice heavy with the truth of it. I might be able to forgive you, but I can't trust you again. It's gone. And I don't know how to live in a marriage where I'm constantly questioning, constantly wondering. We can't build a future on that. Without trust, there is no us. There's just you, and me, and the wreckage. The legal process was a cold, brutal education in the deconstruction of a life. We divided assets, bank accounts, years of accumulated belongings. We did it with a strange, respectful civility, a final act of kindness for the sake of the children who were caught in the crossfire. She kept the house to give them a sense of continuity. I found a small, soulless apartment across town, its bare white walls a constant reminder of my new, solitary existence. The first few months were hell. The silence of my apartment was a physical weight. I'd cook dinner for one and stare at the empty chair across the table. I learned to navigate the awkward choreography of co-parenting, the driveway drop-offs, the brief, polite exchanges about homework and doctor's appointments, the careful avoidance of eye contact. Explaining it to the kids was the hardest thing I've ever had to do. We sat them down together, a united front even in our division. We used gentle words like disagreements and needing different houses, but their young eyes saw through the euphemisms. But are you still going to be friends? Noah asked, his 7-year-old mind trying to fit the pieces together. We will always be your mommy and daddy, Eleanor said, her voice thick with unshed tears. And we will always love you more than anything. It was the truth, but it felt like a hollow comfort. Life settled into a new, fractured normal. I saw the kids on weekends and Wednesdays. I learned to be a father in short, concentrated bursts of activity. We went to the park, built Lego castles, and watched movies on my too small couch. In those moments, I could almost forget, but then Sunday evening would come, and I'd drive them back to the house that used to be mine, watch them run up the steps to their mother, and I would drive back to my empty apartment, the silence rushing in to greet me. Months turned into a year. Julian Vance took a plea deal, probation, and a hefty fine. His name became a footnote. Eleanor and I found a strange, delicate equilibrium. The raw pain subsided into a dull, persistent ache. We became effective co-parents. We attended school conferences together, sitting a careful foot apart. We managed a civil conversation at Sophie's birthday party. We were no longer a couple, but we were something else, two people bound by a shared past and a shared love for our children, navigating the aftermath of a seismic event. I see her sometimes from a distance, at the grocery store or a school event. She looks strong, but tired. The dazzling light that once drew everyone to her has been tempered, replaced by a more subdued, resilient glow. She survived. She faced the consequences. I have to respect her for that. As for me, I am still rebuilding. My apartment is starting to feel less like a temporary shelter and more like a home. I still work my shifts at the hospital, still find solace in the order and routine, but something fundamental inside me has changed. I used to believe that love and commitment were a form of architecture, that if you used the right materials and followed the blueprint, you could build something permanent, something that would withstand any storm. I know now that it's not architecture, it's geometry. It's a delicate, precise alignment of trust and honesty and faith. And once a critical line is broken, once a fundamental angle is altered, the entire structure becomes unstable. You can try to patch it, to brace it, but the integrity is gone forever. All you can do is salvage what you can from the wreckage, and try to build something new, on your own, with the hard-won wisdom of the fall. The love is gone, but the lesson remains. And it's a lesson I will carry for the rest of my life.